Right, good afternoon everybody. Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to see you all here. You'll see a lot more of social credit over the next 12 months or so, running up to the election campaign. So we want to do several things today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to one or two of the party representatives that are here. We're going to have our Deputy Leader Amanda Vickers give you a little introduction to a survey we've done. I'm going to talk a little about the Reserve Bank and the Treasury and the things that they have been calling for recently, and then update you all on where the party is at with its position over Western Milk, which you know the party has launched a challenge to the sale of that company to an overseas Chinese owner. So firstly, a little history of the party. The party first started in 1953. It grew out of an organisation called the Social Credit Association, which had been around for 30 or 40 years prior to that, and that organisation was instrumental in getting the first Labour government elected in 1935, when the social credit movement in those days had about 20,000 members nationwide. The party over the years has had a number of MPs in Parliament. And the first one was Vernon Cracknell, who was elected for the seat of Hobson in 1963. And we're very privileged this afternoon to have one of his daughters, Via, with us in attendance. Welcome to you, and it's a real privilege to have you here with us, because I think all of us in social credit hold Vern in very, very high regard. Just the fact that he was the first to represent social credit, at least under that name, in Parliament, and to win a seat, and a seat such as Hobson, which had been a very strong national seat, and covered an enormous area. The second MP that we had in Parliament was Bruce Beetham, and he was elected in a by-election in 1977, and in the 78 general election, the party achieved 16% of the vote, which is an incredibly high percentage nationwide. In 1980, Gary Knapp was elected in a by-election in East Coast Bays, and in 81, the party got its highest ever nationwide vote, which was 21% of the nationwide vote. And if you compare that to any of the parties other than National or Labour, you have to say that that was an absolutely incredible result, because even the Greens and New Zealand First struggled to meet 6, 7 or 8% in the polls. And had MMP been in existence in 1981, social credit would have had something like 24 MPs, and the face of New Zealand would be very significantly different to what it is today. Our final MP was elected in 1984, and that was Neil Morrison, and he won the seat of Pakuranga in the general election. So that's a brief history of the party. It has been, one could say, a little in the doldrums in recent years, but it's now growing. Membership is increasing. We're attracting significant numbers of young people, and you will see a lot more of social credit on the political front over the next few years. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our new Deputy Leader, Amanda Vickers. Amanda has a degree in science and physiology, and a master's, and is also has a degree in veterinary science. She spent a good number of years working for the British government, combating swine flu and what was the other one?
Foot and mouth.
Foot and mouth, thank you. Foot and mouth in the UK. And when she returned to New Zealand, she started to want to become involved in what was going on in the world. Learnt about the connection between environment and the economy, learnt a little bit about where money comes from, and eventually joined the New Zealand First Party because she was attracted by their stand in opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and also their opposition to the sale of New Zealand to overseas. Of course, they have done an about-face on both of those things, having voted for the TPPA in the last 2 years. And Amanda became very disillusioned with that, naturally, as I think a lot of people did, and she sought other options. Having found social credit, that has had a long-term commitment of opposition to the sale of New Zealand's assets and to international agreements that reduce our ability to make our own decisions about our own country, and also a strong commitment obviously to monetary reform and binding citizens initiated referenda. So consequently she joined Social Credit and she's now the Deputy Leader. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. What I'd like to do is go through with you some results of a survey that the various party members have been busy with throughout different parts of New Zealand about where New Zealand's money comes from. And this is really following on from Money Week, which we've just had. So the Commission for the Financial Capability, they have done a nationwide campaign to raise awareness about money to help people manage their own financial well-being, but they've never actually talked about with the people where the money actually comes from. So that's what prompted us here at Social Credit to go ahead and do a survey to find out what people actually know. And this survey was conducted in various parts of New Zealand. We had Christchurch, Timaru, Wellington, Whangarei, Auckland and Whanganui, I think, are all the different regions that we've collected this data from. And the first question we asked people is how much of New Zealand's money supply is notes and coins? And the results were that 13% of New Zealanders didn't know, another 13% thought it was most of the money supply, and 44% knew that notes and coins make up just less than 10% of the money supply. It's actually 2% of the money supply. So the next question we asked, where does the rest of the money come from? So that's the other 98%. For that question, 17% of New Zealanders didn't know, 20% thought it came from the government, another 20% thought it came from overseas, and 44% thought it came from commercial banks. Thirdly, we asked New Zealanders, where do commercial banks get the money they lend? For this question, 18% didn't know, but a massive 80% thought it came from either the government, from overseas, or for other people's deposits. The people that knew the answer was only 2.8% of the population who said it comes from commercial banks who create debt and therefore the money comes out of thin air. So that's a really small amount of people who actually understand this, and yet it has such a big impact on these people's lives. So we recently found out as well that some economics students in Germany had actually been asking the same questions, and they had very similar results. They found that the majority of their population had no idea where their money comes from. There was also a survey in Switzerland at one point, and they had better results. 13% of the Swiss understood where their money supply came from. But quite interestingly, in the UK, the Positive Money Institution actually went and did a survey with their members of parliament, and it turns out only 15% of the members of parliament really understood how money comes into being. So that's quite telling. How money actually comes into existence has been clearly explained. It's been explained by the Bank of England, and that's on their website, the German Central Bank. It's been explained by the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and the 1956 Royal Commission into Money and Banking in New Zealand, as well as the International Monetary Fund. There are a lot of professors of economics who have clearly stated this, such as Professor Richard Werner, and also economic commentators such as Martin Wolf. So the information is out there. We're very lucky in New Zealand. We have commentators such as Bernard Hickey and Brian Gaynor, who are up to date and aware of how money comes into existence, as well as the commentators like Samuel Bell and Quo. One of the big problems we face is getting this information from these people and institutions to the university lecturers and into the textbooks, because what the universities are teaching their students at the moment is very much a reserve banking model, a fractional reserve banking model, which is a loanable funds model. So at the moment we have students coming out of university with an incorrect perception of how money comes into existence, and it's really a very important distinction to make. This was actually challenged recently at the Auckland Institute of Technology about the way they were teaching where money comes from. Their response from the Vice-Chancellor was, we have academic freedom to teach whatever we want. And then a couple of years later they had a 2-minute, just a very short segment on TV1 where they explained how banking works. And again, it was the loanable funds model. So there were a lot of people who put a complaint into the Broadcasting Standards Authority, and I was one of them, to say you've explained this wrong. And what they did was they then went and did some research to find out who was right. So they went to the universities to ask some of the lecturers, and of course they understood the loanable funds model, and what we found was then that our complaint was not upheld because they thought that we were incorrect. So it is a very important distinction to make, and the reason it's important is as follows. Because a loanable funds model, which is, it implies that what happens is the banks are more passive and that they're going to rely on the public to put deposits in first, and that they can only react passively to that and make the loans after that. It also implies that the entire economy's money supply is under the control of the central bank, because the central bank could change the amount of base money or could change the reserve ratio. And it also implies that the money supply can't possibly get out of control unless the central bank wants it to. So this was clearly not the case, as in displayed by the 2008 financial crisis. And there's a quote from the former chairman of the Financial Services Authority in the UK, Adair Turner, who said, "The global financial crisis of 2008 occurred because we failed to constrain the financial system's creation of private credit and money." So here at Social Credit, we understand what's really happening, and that's why we're calling on the universities, the Department of Education, and the Commission for Financial Capability to teach the truth about money creation in New Zealand. Social Credit have always recognised the problems with the present way money is issued, and we aim to implement a monetary system where the Reserve Bank of New Zealand issues the country's new money, not private financial institutions, and where the government can use that capacity to build infrastructure and houses, fund hospitals and schools, and reduce poverty. The sooner we lift the veil on the insidious monetary system we have and replace it with a system that works for people and planet, the better. Thanks.
Okay, well,